Guess what? We're back. I told you this happens. And yeah, I was talking earlier here at the conference with Joao. We met and we had a small conversation. I told him, "Can you come?" And I don't know if you came by earlier or tried because we were really busy. But you just showed up.
Uh, Before when we were talking,
Yeah,
I think we were at the lunch table
at
or
the
something like
lunch.
that.
Yeah.
That was it.
Well, I didn't foresee this, and as I warned, because we were gonna do the last interview earlier, and I was like, I have a feeling someone else will show up. So,
Yeah.
so I have with you guys, João Proença.
Yes.
Yes, I rocked it. From Portugal.
Yeah.
João, for everyone watching, please give us a brief introduction so that people that do not know you
Yeah.
can get familiar.
So I'm a quality engineer at a company called Ada Health. I've been in the industry of tech for, I don't know, around 16 years now. I've done a lot of different things throughout my career. Started as a quality assurance engineer, but I also did some, 3D rendering research. I was a developer. I was in customer support. I was in ops. At some point, I was in marketing because I found that interesting. So I decided to go into marketing, and then 6 months later, found that I was an engineer at heart. So I came back, and then again a developer, and eventually I got back into the testing quality world. In 2017, I attended my first Agile testing days because I was curious about the conference. I'd seen, interesting things about it online.
In Potsdam.
In Potsdam, yes. And it was a, let's say, career-changing moment where I met some friends. I gathered up those friends. We decided, let's try and become speakers as well. And then we got into public speaking. And so nowadays you'll see me talking about various different subjects that relate to testing or not, or maybe they do, in different testing conference or software development conferences, or even agile conferences. So I usually cover topics like quality engineering as a whole, automation, observability, but also I also have some content where I tap into the psychology of things. So one of the things I have been doing with a friend of mine, Mika Kutz, who is also a regular presenter at Agile Testing Days, is that we've put together a workshop on cognitive biases. And we've been delivering that workshop because at the end of the day, we can talk a lot about tech, but a lot of times we're talking about the problems within tech organizations, and those problems are about people and the way we react to things and the way we communicate with each other. So we like to tap into these subjects as well.
It's really interesting, and I'm gonna bring back. You mentioned 3D rendering first.
Yes.
How was that? What type of rendering?
So this was a long time ago, but when I finished up college, I stayed at university doing research because at the time my supervisor kind of invited me into it, and I found it interesting. It was so it was in 2007, so things have changed a bit. But we were doing it as something which was a bit different, which is usually when you think about 3D rendering, people are trying to achieve photorealism. You know, you want your video games to be as realistic as possible, but I was doing kind of the opposite. Is how we can render in real time 3D objects like you would render them if they were drawn on pen and paper, or
a little
like
bit
a
like
drawing. Yeah,
the Spider-Man movie
yeah,
or
yeah.
the
In this
Dragon Ball
case,
game, like
yeah,
looks like a cartoon.
like a cartoon, but here we were looking more at stuff that had medical applications. Like, so for instance, if you want to look at the 3D rendering of
An X-ray?
of an MRI, like it's if you're going to try to make it, let's say, photorealistic, you won't understand a single thing because just imagine all of the different things you have inside. So the idea is not to show all of the details, but actually abstract and show the important details, the high level details, which is what usually you get when you open a medical textbook. You see, drawings of the different organs and whatnot, because you don't want to see a picture, otherwise you're not going really to understand where the heart ends and the stomach starts and whatnot, because it's harder. So that was
just a
the
weird
key idea.
extruded situation in your 3D render and doesn't like
Yeah.
differentiate. That's super interesting. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that caught my attention. Like, huge area. I don't know. Why didn't you continue there?
Well, simple thing. I found that when you're in academia and going into the academia circuit, a lot of times I felt that you are only doing research for research's sake, and you don't really see your work being applied in the real world. It's kind of like, we're doing research. A lot of the stuff that I was doing is like, I'm not entirely sure if this is ever going to see the light of day, and having actual people and users using it. And a lot of times, well, that's just the world of academia. Sometimes things come out to the real world. Sometimes you're just exploring new ideas that then build up upon other new ideas, but only after a long time you get these big breakthroughs that translate into the real world. And that for me was a bit frustrating. I wanted to work in things that saw the light of production and that real users were using. Yeah.
I don't know. I right now I could tell with AI and analyzing some MRIs and some information that you can generate from information a 3D render of some of these studies. I think that now I see an application. Probably on those days was a bit more difficult, but well, the roads of life take us in different places. And the other one that you mentioned, it's funny. It's sort of almost like a serendipity. I'm also working in a cognitive bias in QA situation, because we are human beings full of cognitive biases that helped us to survive in the jungle, but we are not in the jungle anymore. And we keep doing some of those things as if we were in the jungle. And right away, which cognitive biases you identify the most or most frequently, and could you explain them? Because I know some people are not that much into psychology.
Yeah. So actually, Mikhail and I, a couple of years ago, back in 2021, we presented a talk at ATD in Germany, which was called Fantastic Biases and Where You Find Them in Software Development. So there are a number of them. So one which I tend to see that is a very common one is the anchor effect, which is one who is really rooted into negotiations, because and we have it around us throughout the world. I'm sorry, my phone is ringing, and I thought I had took.
We have enough noise around here that it's one more done.
But nevertheless, so for instance, the anchor effect is whenever you approach some sort of subject, the first piece of information will have too much importance when you consider the rest of the information. If you think about negotiations, the first number that's thrown to the table usually influences the rest of the negotiations. Either if you're buying a house and all of a sudden you see the price of the house, that's already influencing how much you're willing to negotiate. If you mark it down below, you're going to revolve around that number. Now, these things are important, and sometimes the anchor effect is used to kind of like guide people. Like if you go to the supermarket and you see the promotions where it's like, this used to be $50, now it's $30. It's like you're already, maybe it wasn't exactly $50, but you're being influenced to believe that
the partial point in the decision has been fixed there.
Exactly. Where does that translate into, for instance, software engineering? There are various places, especially when you think about like the first pieces of information. When we're doing estimations, for instance, one thing that in order to facilitate a proper estimation exercise, you must make sure that people do not influence one another. And this also goes into any other sort of brainstorming exercise. If someone puts up an idea or puts up a number before others, even if they don't want to, they end up influencing the rest of the group. So that is why you have then good ways to counter it, like let's say liberating structures like the 1-2-for-all approach, which basically it's like, hey, you want to brainstorm ideas, but what we're going to do is like, first, each person will write for themselves a few ideas they believe are important. Then they discuss that with the person sitting next to them. The two come to a conclusion of what is the strongest idea we can think of from our ideas. Then those two pairs join up, a group of four, and then in the end you have different groups of four for presenting those ideas. This counters this notion of like, maybe what I'm going to do is that I'm going to put a board and people start putting stickies. But once you're already putting pieces of information and other people are already noticing what you're putting, you're already influencing
They're trying to do
them.
the same.
You know, so all this is one which is really easy to explain. But of course, there are a lot of other cognitive biases. Like we like to talk about the affinity bias, which is really so it's really rooted into the way we function as humans, being in the jungle, like you were saying. You know, the affinity bias just tells you we're hardwired to group up, taking into account the similarities between us. Now, of course, that so this then ends up being assertive bias that's behind a lot of issues that we talk a lot in the industry, like diversity and lack of
A
diversity
little bit
and
of
whatnot.
racism is where that
Yeah,
parts
and
from.
even a lack of diverse teams and whatnot. One thing I think it's important for us to understand is that sometimes this doesn't even need to be about race. You know, there are exercises that we've done in the past where we don't use race, we use things like colors and stickies, and we can get a group through exercises to bond just by looking at their similarities.
Cool.
Just by instead of thinking, what about forming a group that's in which the way we are forming it is actually around what's different between us, so that we have a lot of diversity within the group. What's interesting about the affinity bias and the diversity conversations that we have, a lot of times people don't realize, but there's scientific evidence that shows us that high performance teams tend to correlate to teams that have a lot of diversity. So diversity usually brings a lot of creativity and a lot of richness in terms of opinions and
Different
perspectives
perspectives,
into
reframing,
into a team, and that's usually a strong factor to make that team more effective and performant.
If I may add, I think that this situation, this eternal war, devs versus QAs, and I'm not a dev, I'm not
Yeah,
learning
yeah.
how to code, has to do a little bit with that because you identify and it's like
Yeah.
pertinence. I don't know.
So yeah, so we basically we explore a lot of different cognitive biases. There are others.
Do you, that one that I like, the man with a hammer, do you?
What's
explore?
that one?
So I'm not sure if it's a syndrome or a bias. It says that he who learns well how to hammer will see nails everywhere and try to fix everything with a hammer.
Yeah.
And I like to show some people here that learn how to automate with one tool.
Yeah.
Will try to automate everything with that same tool or fix the problem to the tool.
Yep.
And that's another bias that I generally present on the situations, and I see that everywhere. But which others?
So, for instance, another one which I also like to talk about is the availability bias. And the availability bias is like whenever you have examples present and available examples of something, you tend to believe that that something is more important or frequent than it actually is. It's kind of like a lot of people are afraid of traveling by airplane because every time there's an airplane crash, that ends up in the news. You know, but it's statistically you have a better chance of dying on your way to the airport on your car than when flying. But it's not like we're reporting all the car crashes on the news every
and you are not
day.
afraid. Do you know here in the US there's this show Shark Week?
Yes.
Where people get all nervous, and
Yeah.
I believe that attendance to the beach is
Yes.
it lowers a little bit. But I thought I saw it was you have more probabilities to die from a cow?
From bee stings, like from attack from bees.
Bees?
Yes, more people die in the States every year by being attacked by bees than by sharks.
By cows. I saw the statistic that a cow can step on people or kill them, blah, 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 than sharks. And but still, we are all like, oh my God, did you see the blood in the show? And it's like, so it's...
And so the availability bias is also another one, which it's one that's really pervasive. Like people don't realize it's happening, but it's like sometimes decisions are made within organizations around the recent examples of something. And so if you imagine, we've all been there where there's this large incident or something bad that happens with a specific user base or clients, and then you have the whole company working towards fixing that, over the next few months, people will say, this is one of the highest priorities because it happened and it was really bad. But you should always make sure that you know, okay, but this is a recent example. We must not
Do not
fall
lose
prey,
sight of the.
yeah, of the availability bias, because sometimes very rare things may happen, but it doesn't mean that they're going to happen next month or whatnot. You really need to look at the data, so that you have this, data, let's say, justified notion of to back up
That's
your decisions.
another bias, the loss aversion effect.
Yes,
When
absolutely.
you think that previous events affect the future ones, like no, you may never see that error again. That might maybe.
Yeah.
What other examples of those applied specifically to QA? Have you seen?
Loss aversion. So the reason why I got into this topic and I found it very interesting was, I once did a talk that I presented here at ETD as well, about deleting automated tests, which is something that's like, yeah, sure, deleting automated tests. And I started that talk by talking about loss aversion. And even what I did is that there's a very simple exercise that you can do in 5 minutes that demonstrates loss aversion. Which is, I can even do it here right now. Which is,
Okay.
imagine that I give you, this is a game, okay? You need to choose between option A and option B, okay? With option A, you automatically win $900, okay? That's yours. With option B, there's a gamble. There's a 90% chance that you win $1,000, and there's a small 10% chance that you won't win anything.
Mm-hmm.
Do you prefer option A or option B?
I mean, I kind of know the experiment, but I know that for sure I'm gonna win with the other one. I go with the win.
Okay, so you go with
And-
option A.
Yeah,
Okay.
but because that lose is kind of threatening me.
Yeah, of course.
From-
But nevertheless, let's do a second game.
Mhm.
Okay. Once again, you need to choose between option A and option. Oh, and by the way, let me tell you that 80% of the population tends to will statistically will answer the same way you did in the
Mhm,
previous example. Now, second exercise. Once again, option A, option B. Now you're not winning. Let's imagine that with option A, you owe me $900. So you need to pay me $900, okay? With option B, it's a gamble once again.
Mhm.
There's a 10%, a 90% chance that you owe me $1,000, or a small 10% chance that you're off the hook and you don't owe me anything. What do you prefer now?
Oh, both of them sound peculiar. um, this is interesting. Let's go with I end up not owing anything. I'd
The
rather
B?
not lose.
Exactly. And for the second exercise, usually 72% of the population will answer option B.
Mhm.
Now, the two exercises are very similar in nature. And even like the two options that I'm giving you, from a statistic point of view, it's kind of like the same. It's either a sure thing or it's a gamble.
But did I pay more attention
Exactly.
to on the exercise?
But the only difference between the two exercises is that you're either considering a win or you're considering a loss.
Mhm.
And even when you were considering a win, you were already thinking about the loss. Like, I don't want to
What's my
fall.
first thought?
I don't want to fall into those 10% small percentage where all of a sudden I don't win anything. And this idea really changes the way we behave.
Mhm.
Now, okay, let's fast forward and let's think about test automation. You work in quality, you're building your test automation suite and whatnot. At some point, someone suggests, why don't we delete this test? The immediate reaction from anyone once they are, it's like,
Mhm.
that's a loss, loss aversion. It's like, there may be various reasons that actually justify for you to delete a specific test, but when you're considering deleting something that you've even built, that's a really powerful, really strong feeling,
Reaction.
and it's a common reaction. A good way I like to put things so that people think of it in a different way, like flipping the loss aversion is, okay, don't think about deleting this. I'm going to ask this question. See this test? We have this test in our test suite. It's built. Let's imagine that a disaster happens today and it gets deleted by accident. Tomorrow, would you be writing the test again, or would you be doing something else?
I like that.
You know, because
You
all of a
are-
sudden it's like you're thinking about, is this a thing I want to win, or is my time better spent in
It's
somewhere
great because
else?
you're using another trick that you mentioned earlier. You're reframing
Exactly.
the perspective, because if it's from a loss,
Yes.
okay, is it from a rework?
Yep.
The loss is like, I'm not thinking that much about that, and I'm
Yeah.
focusing on it. Is it still usable rather than I'm losing my automations? And I have seen that, like, we know suites with thousands of automations there that no one dares to delete
Yeah. Exactly.
for some weird reason, and that hurts teams like crazy.
Yep.
And we have to wait thousands of hours until this whole suite that does
Exactly.
who knows what, and maybe it not even work. This is a great perspective. Are you presenting anytime soon any of this?
Well, I have been presenting these things extensively in the past few years. This year, I'm not focusing as much on cognitive biases, even though Mika
It's a
Kutz and
great topic.
we do deliver this workshop. So you see this exercise, this almost feels like a pitch, but it wasn't rehearsed. So the last time we presented this workshop was back in March this year in a conference in Norway called BoosterConf, which was a developer conference. But basically, is we have a workshop on cognitive biases in which our idea is to let's do these exercises like the one we just did, the two of us here, to get the audience to feel the cognitive biases firsthand, rather than having an instructor telling them this is hindsight bias, this is, which makes it harder to understand if you experience it firsthand, because we create these games in these situations where usually the bias comes up. That's much more powerful for people to realize, yeah, we actually do these things.
Because
And it's,
we always think that we don't fall for those biases,
but
right?
then we do.
Totally. It's unbelievable. A topic that I love. Just before we close it up,
Yep.
because I promised this was going to be brief. Have you ever read "You Are Not So Smart"?
It's like, so Mika
Dave
and I,
McRaney.
when we were preparing for the workshop and talks, we did this pact. I read Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, and he is the father of cognitive biases and thinking about this. He even won the Nobel Prize in economics because of this. My friend Mikhail, he studied that book of You're Not So Smart, and he always references. Those are the two major references we give out at the end of our workshop. If people want to know more about cognitive biases, either read Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, or
Dave McRaney?
Dave McRaney's You're Not So Smart, with the caveat that Dave McRaney's You're Not So Smart is a more easy
Super
reading.
digestive.
Yeah.
Because Thinking Fast and Slow is a little bit can get deep at times.
Exactly.
But both are awesome reads, super enjoyable. And if you can apply it to QA, to your daily life, even, it's incredible. Joao, I'm super happy to have had this opportunity to talk with you and share this. Cognitive biases is a huge topic, and I'm super happy that I'm not the only one talking about them here and there. I look forward to hearing more of your talks, these ones that you're preparing. Where can people follow up with you and get in touch?
So the best place to follow me is either through LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm very active on Twitter, at least while it's still up, and
Well, it still exists. We don't know what is going to happen there.
So my Twitter handle is João Proença. So you can find me if you look for João Proença. You're probably going to find me.
You will be tagged on LinkedIn
Yes.
if anyone wants to get in touch, and on YouTube, you heard. Get in touch, reach out to figure out your biases and many other QA situations. And Joe, thank you very much.
Thank you so much as well.
Again, I don't know if anything is going to happen still, but this may be the last one. So this is Agile Testing Days from Chicago. It has been a pleasure. Maybe this is the ramp down. And if not, I'll see you next week in QA or the highway. We will be doing some more noise, some more fun. And everyone, have a great day. Adiós.
Have a great day.
Thank you, João.
Obrigado.
Obrigado.